people, almost the people who are most inclined towards being men, are now in a state of depression. And Jordan Peterson offers them, maybe halfway, or maybe even not even halfway. Just that basic sense of clean your room, go be an upright, decent individual and make money. I mean, it's a kind of middle class answer to a traditionalist, fundamentally human question, and it's inherently inadequate.
Let me ask you this for clarification, because I find this ironic, because you're considered an alt-right figure. Vox Day is considered an alt-right figure. Jordan Peterson is not. I used to be a fan of Jordan Peterson, but I'm not. But Vox Day says that Jordan Peterson's philosophy can essentially be summed up as sort of an existential relativism. Would you say? Would you be an existential relativist? Because in that sense, you'd be closer to a Jordan Peterson philosophy than a Vox Day philosophy.
What does he mean by existential relativism exactly?
I think what he means is that Jordan Peterson essentially doesn't have a coherent definition of truth. So he is basically... See, I kind of find him a little incoherent, because he basically acknowledges that there's like a spiritual aspect of your being, but you can sort of subjectively define reality based on your own... It's existentialism, I guess, in the sense that you can make up your own meaning, I guess. So I personally think that... Peterson's a bit incoherent there, but I also am myself, though I come out of a Christian background, I'm more of an agnostic type of thinker. So, although I don't really like Jordan Peterson, I tend to more lean towards that than full-on Orthodox Christianity or whatever Vox Day is. So, but you're also an alt-right figure, but not like Vox Day in that sense, because you'd be more like me in the sense of more... not dogmatically Christian, that's for sure.
I have, you could say, maybe a tragic understanding of this question. I mean, at some level, the universe is total chaos, and we're all going to end up as worm food. And any project that we attempt, however well conceived, is going to fall apart at some point. But we do it anyway. I mean, that actually was the ultimate lesson of things fall apart, is that we build them back up. There was actually, I think I quoted this before, to quote Batman, who is a major alt-right figure, the world only makes sense when you force it to. That actually comes from the Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, and it was quoted in Batman v Superman, a movie I actually liked, although everyone else hated it.
I liked it. But yeah,
I thought that it was the best comic book movie ever made, but everyone else hated it, and maybe that's kind of telling. A lot of people in the world seem to disagree with me. They quoted that line, and I think that was that tragic conception of the world. I mean, this is deeply Nietzschean. Nietzsche recognized that at some level it was better to not have ever been born. That is the ultimate terrible truth. That life is about pain and suffering, and then you die. But the condition of being a human, or being, you could say, Western, is not to just give in to that suffering and engage in life denial, but to actually attempt to create something that lasts. And yes, at some point the sun is going to collapse and swallow us all. Whatever. But if we're always thinking about that kind of suffering and despair, we're not motivated to attempt something that is life-affirming. And so, I would say maybe I have a kind of tragic relativism, or you could say a tragic nihilism. We need to overcome that terrible truth of nihilism, that the world is chaos and that we're all going to end up as worm food. We need to overcome that through the attempt of creating a infinite project in the here and now. And those projects can be architecture, something that will last forever. Those projects can be a poem that is recited 1,000, 2,000 years from now. Or that project can be a race, a line that goes on into eternity.
Interesting. I tend to that resonates with me as well a lot. Hence why I don't consider myself a practicing fundamentalist Christian, but have you considered perhaps that for lower IQ people, Christianity or a helpful lie is better for them, and that like
No question.
because I tend to be of two minds on this issue because higher IQ men, for example, have to face nihilism head on, and sometimes I think if you can recognize it, whereas a lot of people, like just because I want to be intellectually honest and say, oh, I'm a nihilist, but I wouldn't, if I had a young daughter, for example, I wouldn't want to scare the shit out of her. I wouldn't, I'd want to raise,
Yeah, exactly.
I'd give her Christianity, keep her happy, and so to what, maybe
when your daughter turns 8,
yeah, just pull the rug off and traumatize
right,
her.
Yeah. Let me disabuse you of all your illusions so that you'll, enter a stage of extreme depression and perhaps suicide. No, obviously that's not a good child rearing technique. And I do agree that, in terms of the masses, they're going to need comforting lies in order for them to live their lives. I mean, and again, someone's going to probably accuse me of extreme cynical elitism when I say something like that, but it's obviously the case. They're going to have to be given a comforting illusion. It is, people, like Nietzsche and others who are confronting those shattering truths of nihilism, that are able to confront them and overcome them and swallow it, but then recover from it. And that's not the right word. A shortcut to the truth that we don't have to give them that inner truth, but there can be a kind of outer a shell that is more comforting and that is inspiring for them and gives meaning to their life. Humans need meaning.
Right.
We don't just need, in terms of the hierarchy of needs, I would almost argue that meaning is more important than food and shelter. And
you sound like
mean
Jordan
that
Peterson
seriously.
now.
Well, I do, because it's like look, Jordan Peterson's an interesting figure, and there's a lot to criticize there, particularly over the past year where he's really gone after the alt-right and done all this stuff. But I do think he's getting at something real. I mean, one can have all the shelter, comfort, and food that one could ever dream of, but if one lacks meaning, one could still starve in such an environment. So I do think in the hierarchy of needs, meaning is actually perhaps number one.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I'm reminded of that cliche line in Fight Club where it says, our Great Depression is a spiritual depression. And then I think, like, men in the West, just we're not living in an environment that men were meant to live in, which is a threatening one where we are sort of expendable protector, hunter-gatherer types. And so it doesn't surprise me that although we have comfort modernity, our suicide rates are spiked and all of that other, garbage. Because, I'm super proud of the West. I am proud to be Western. I think it's the greatest. I love being Faustian, but it's also clearly has some sort of existential meaning now, especially being post-Christian and stuff. And so, even I tend to think more like you, but I think, like, I understand Vox Dei in the sense that Christianity is a good building block. It obviously produced the modern West, so I don't even know anymore if I add, like, I culturally think it's a good thing, but it can, as we already acknowledged, it can also weaken a population as well, which is why I think Islam is starting to dominate the West in some ways, and yeah. I want to bring back fire back into the Faustian mind of Western man so that we can preserve the West. It gets all pretty complicated, but yeah, I tend to resonate with a lot of the things you've said. Let's see. There's a question in the chat here and directed at both of us, but I actually haven't figured out an answer to this, so I'm curious what your take on it. And the question is, how does one prevent Western man's Faustianness from devolving into a hedonistic hyper-individualism? Peterson is capitalizing on this at the moment. I agree with that. So, the Faustianness leads to an abstract individualism, or it has, it seems, in the West. The abstract individualism is what Peterson capitalizes on and promotes, as well as a lot of other sort of libertarian-type people. That sort of gets in the way of whites recognizing the collectivist nature of people.
I just think there has to be a healthy tension. I don't think it's either or. In the sense of a lot of people, and it's interesting because there's mentioning, Greg Johnson and so on. A lot of these people like to create these polemics, and they almost become kind of like priestly. They're like, oh, this is the right way. This is our dogma. I'm not like that. I think for me, there's always a tension between these things. There is a great deal of individualism within the West. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's a much greater emphasis on individualism and the recognition between people than there is in, say, China or something. That is a collectivist society that is maybe something that we don't want to imitate, but a kind of bad collectivism. But at the same time, I think we'd probably all agree there almost needs to be more collectivism among whites, that we're too individualistic. Someone like Jordan Peterson, he gets a lot of things right, but he gets this fundamental thing wrong, which is that we need to abandon our collective identity and go clean our room or make a lot of money or kind of be upright individuals, which is, again, all fine and good, but it's missing something essential. So I think there needs to be that tension. Even when we go back to between ethno-nationalism and empire, it's not either or. When if I were to describe your dumb ethno-nationalist who wants to have a neighborhood-sized nation-state and block out everyone else and all ideas from other places, a kind of provincialism or closed-mindedness, that's obviously a bad thing. And much the same way when you create a straw man of empire and say, oh, we just want to stamp out the world and, crush every expression of individualism or ethnic identity or so. I obviously don't want to do that. There has to be a kind of healthy tension between these things. And when one goes too far on the other side, we need to bring it back. I do think there needs to be a hegemonic bloc for Europeans, but that doesn't mean we're going to go and crush every ethnic group that comes up. That's just a bizarre straw man version of what I'm saying. And just because I am a collectivist in this sense doesn't mean that we want no individuality. We all want to dress up like we're a good communist in North Korea or underlings of a James Bond villain and all wear the identical jumpsuits and walk around our factory working together. I mean, no. There just needs to be that healthy tension. There has to be that tension in the soul to give birth to something greater than oneself.
Right. I think that there's this Faustian soul thing that we've been discussing here, this spiritual thing. I don't know how to it's something that I think takes age or experience to recognize, perhaps. And Jordan Peterson is sort of countering I think younger people won't recognize its existence, essentially, because people are denying, I guess, race realism, which is a part of it, as well as Peterson. I think I was a fan of him for a while, and certain things I really respect him for, and other things I dislike. And I think that he's also presented himself as a father figure, and he's maybe on the road to showing you how to be a man, but he stops way before getting to the actual destination of showing you how to be a man. So when I look at the West, I think of the Greco-Roman influence and the Spartans and stuff like that, and we were so masculine back then in Western history, but as compared to as we are now. And so I'm just thinking again about getting how do we counter a message but at the same time, Jordan Peterson is I'm not a Christian either dogmatically, so I think we both acknowledge that there's this sort of open-ended spiritual aspect of existence that's kind of there's a nihilistic spiritualism thing going on, but I guess what I'm getting at is where are men supposed to really get an idea of how to be like a man and deal with aggression and violence and stuff like that beyond just clean your room? I mean, clean your room is great, right? But what happens when there's bad guys knocking on the door, and we have to go be aggressive with people, go to war, that sort of thing. That's not even remotely touched upon, right? So Where
Right.
where do
No,
we
I,
look
I
to for
think
that?
we've actually covered this throughout this conversation. I mean,
I
I do
guess.
think that there needs to be an outlet for not just the Faustian spirit, but just the, badassery of white males. There needs to be some outlet, whether that is space exploration. As outlandish as that sounds, it's not actually that outlandish. It's something that is imminently possible. I do think there needs to be that outlet. There needs to be that sense of us and them, in the sense of we have to guard what we have. We don't, there is something extremely feminine or bugmanized about the refugees welcome. Just like, come on in. There are no gates. There are no barbarians. Just everyone's one kind of thing. Come on in. I obviously think we need to reject that. There should be strong men guarding the gates. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we obviously, our society is lacking this. And the people who are most inclined towards being men are now in a state of depression. And Jordan Peterson offers them, maybe halfway or maybe even not even halfway. Just
Right.
that basic sense of clean your room, go be an upright, decent individual and make money. I mean, it's a kind of middle class answer to a traditionalist, fundamentally human question, and it's inherently inadequate.